It was late 1943, somewhere above the Pacific Ocean. The sky was quiet, almost too quiet. From a distance, the silver outline of an American bomber formation shimmered against the rising sun. But trailing just behind them was a single lonely aircraft. A Lockheed P-38 Lightning, its twin engines growling through the humid tropical air. Inside that cockpit sat a pilot unlike any other. His name was Captain Edward Ghost Eye Hawthorne, a man both feared and misunderstood. He had 20 confirmed kills to his name, yet not a single bullet fired from his guns. How was that even possible? How could a pilot be credited with destroying enemy planes without ever pulling the trigger? That's the mystery that left Allied intelligence puzzled, Japanese pilots terrified, and historians debating for decades. Captain Hawthorne wasn't born a hero. He was a quiet farm boy from Kansas who grew up fixing tractors and watching clouds roll over endless wheat fields. Flying was never his dream, survival was. When war broke out, he joined the Army Air Corps, not out of patriotism, but because, as he once told a friend, it was the only job that promised a view better than dirt. But there was something different about Hawthorne. Even during training, instructors noticed his uncanny awareness, how he could see other planes before anyone else did. He had near-supernatural spatial judgment. He could sense threats in his blind spots, anticipate where the enemy would appear, and react before they even fired. Pilots joked he had a sixth sense, but that instinct wasn't magic. It was experience, sharpened by fear, precision, and a mind wired for prediction. By mid-1943, he was assigned to the 347th Fighter Group in the Solomon Islands, one of the deadliest skies of the Pacific Theater. Japanese Zeros ruled the air, fast and agile, preying on Allied bombers. Most American pilots never survived their first 5 missions. But Hawthorne wasn't like most pilots. It started with a strange combat report. During a mission over Rabaul, Hawthorne led a small escort of P-38s protecting B-25 bombers. Japanese fighters swarmed from the clouds, at least a dozen of them. Radio chatter exploded with panic as American pilots tried to hold formation. Hawthorne said nothing. Instead, he did something bizarre. He throttled down. He broke formation and dove toward the enemy, engines screaming, nose angled into the rising sun. Other pilots thought he was suicidal. But as he cut across the sun's glare, something happened. The Japanese pilots lost visual contact. They couldn't track his movement. Seconds later, 2 Zeros collided while trying to dodge him. Another pulled too hard on the stick, stalling and spinning into the ocean. No shots fired. 3 enemy planes gone, because one man understood fear better than anyone. When Hawthorne returned to base, his squadron didn't believe the story. But gun camera footage confirmed it. The collision, the stall, the chaos, all caused by his sudden, unpredictable maneuver. It wasn't luck. It was psychological warfare in the sky. From that day, he started perfecting it. He learned how to use light, altitude, and deception to make his opponents panic. Sometimes he'd dive straight toward them, forcing them to turn too sharply and break their wings. Other times he'd pull impossible climbs, vanishing into the clouds, making the enemy believe he was about to attack from behind. Pilots began calling it ghosting, Japanese radio intercepts soon. Mentioned a mysterious American pilot who haunted the Guim skies. One report described him as a shadow that kills without firing. They started avoiding engagements whenever his aircraft markings appeared, but Hawthorne wasn't invincible. Every time he went up, he knew one mistake could make him his own victim. He was flying a razor's edge. One wrong calculation, and he'd stall, black out, or burn out his engines. His aircraft was his weapon, and his mind was the trigger. As the missions piled up, so did the rumors. Some said he used his P-38's prop wash to throw lighter Japanese planes off balance. Others believed he deliberately flew dangerously close, creating turbulence that flipped enemies mid-turn. No one could prove it. But the results spoke for themselves. 20 planes destroyed. No ammunition used. No gunfire. Just pure psychological precision and mastery of flight physics. Commanders debated whether to count his victories as official kills, but intelligence analysts confirmed. Every enemy aircraft lost after direct engagement with Hawthorne had crashed, burned, or been abandoned. So they credited him. 20 kills, 0 bullets. The legend of Ghost Eyes spread across the Pacific. To the Americans, he was a genius. To the Japanese, a phantom. But to those who flew beside him, he was something else entirely. A man haunted by the silence of his victories. Because while others celebrated their kills, Hawthorne never did. He said once, quietly to his crew chief, "They all fell because they were afraid, and fear is the ugliest weapon I've ever used." As 1944 dawned and the Pacific War escalated, Ghost Eye's tactics would change the way aerial combat was fought forever. But with every mission, his brilliance came at a cost, a psychological one that no medal could fix. And soon, his final flight would test whether the man who never fired a bullet could survive the moment when the bullets finally came for him. The Pacific sky was a cruel teacher. Every lesson came with a price, and Captain Edward Ghost Eye Hawthorne was running out of time to pay it. By early 1944, the American campaign was pushing deeper into Japanese-held territory. New bases, longer missions, and more desperate enemy pilots meant that every flight could be the last. The air war had evolved, and so had Ghost Eye's legend. In the officers' tents, pilots whispered his name before missions. Some called him Death's Mirage. Others joked that even Japanese radar refused to pick him up. But behind the jokes was unease. No one could understand how one man could walk away from so many dogfights untouched. Hawthorne didn't like the attention. He kept to himself, sleeping near his aircraft, his flight suit often stained with oil and sweat. His crew chief, Corporal Harris, once said, "He treated that P-38 like a living thing. He'd talk to it before every mission, like he was asking it for forgiveness. He wasn't a showman. He didn't drink, didn't brag, didn't chase glory. He just flew, with precision that seemed almost mechanical. But what his fellow pilots didn't see was the cost of that precision." Every time he came back, Hawthorne's hands shook a little longer before they steadied. Every time he looked at the horizon, he seemed to drift further away from the world around him. One humid morning, orders came for a deep strike over the Bismarck Sea. Japanese convoys had been spotted supplying reinforcements to the front. Hawthorne's unit would escort bombers through heavy enemy airspace. It was the kind of mission where luck mattered more than skill. The formation took off at dawn. Below them, the ocean shimmered like glass, broken only by the shadows of passing clouds. As they approached the target zone, radio chatter grew tense. "Bandits, 3 o'clock high," came the call. 12 Zeros diving fast. Hawthorne's calm voice crackled through the headset. "Stay in formation, don't chase." He knew what was coming, a coordinated dive attack meant to scatter the bombers. But instead of climbing to meet the enemy, Hawthorne did the opposite. He dropped below the formation, cutting throttle until his engines roared unevenly. The Zeros, mistaking him for a crippled fighter, dove after him. He let them. At the last second, he rolled inverted and pulled hard into the clouds. The Japanese pilots followed, and that's when chaos began. Visibility vanished. Compass needles spun from magnetic interference. 1 Zero clipped another's wing. 2 more overcompensated and spiraled downward, disoriented. When Hawthorne burst out of the clouds, 3 planes were gone. "Jesus, Ghost Eye, you see that?" his wingman shouted over the radio. "Yeah," Hawthorne replied. "They scared themselves." But this time, the maneuver didn't end cleanly. Shrapnel from an exploding Zero had torn into his left engine. The lightning shuddered, smoke trailing from one nacelle. He should have turned back. Instead, he stayed, circling above the crippled bombers until the mission was complete. When he finally landed, the ground crew counted 23 holes in his aircraft. He didn't say a word. He just climbed out, lit a cigarette with shaking hands, and stared at the horizon for what felt like hours. After that mission, Ghost Eye became something else. Not just a pilot, but a weapon of strategy. Allied Command began studying his combat recordings, trying to decode how one man could manipulate enemy pilots into self-destruction. Intelligence officers coined a term for it: psychological aerial denial. The idea was simple: use fear, not firepower, to control the skies. But there was a darker side to it. Every time Hawthorne forced an enemy down, he saw the faces behind the wreckage in his dreams. He'd wake up sweating, muttering the same line. They weren't trying to kill me, they were trying to escape me. His wingman, Lieutenant Frank Keller, started noticing the change. You used to fly like you wanted to win, Keller said. Now you fly like you're trying to disappear. Hawthorne didn't answer. He just said, You ever hear a man scream when it's swallowed by the ocean? That's the sound I keep hearing. Weeks later, Hawthorne was called to a briefing in Port Moresby. A colonel from intelligence was waiting, a file in his hand. Captain Hawthorne, he said, Japanese radio intercepts mention a new squadron. They're calling it the Death Hunters. They've been ordered to find and kill you specifically. Hawthorne just smiled faintly. Then they'll save me the trouble of finding them. He knew what it meant. The legend of Ghost Eye had become a challenge. For the Japanese, shooting him down would be an act of redemption. For the Americans, keeping him alive had become a symbol of morale. His next mission came with a grim twist. Fly solo reconnaissance over enemy-held islands to lure out the Death Hunters. Command wanted to test a new radar system and needed bait. Hawthorne didn't hesitate. If they're hunting me, he said, I'll give them a reason. He took off before dawn, skimming the ocean barely 50 feet above the waves to stay off radar. The sky was a dull grey, the sea calm, almost reflective. For 2 hours, nothing moved. Then, the blip appeared. 4 enemy fighters, closing fast. He climbed gently, keeping just within their line of sight. The trick wasn't to run, it was to lead. He wanted them to believe they had control. The first Zero opened fire. Tracers streaked past his canopy. Hawthorne banked sharply, cutting throttle, forcing them to overshoot. Then instead of chasing, he dove again, toward the water. The Japanese pilots followed, their speed rising too quickly. Their focus locked on him. The ocean rushed closer. The first pilot pulled up too late. His wingtip clipped the surface. A flash, a spray, then nothing. Hawthorne stayed low, engines screaming. He could feel the spray hitting his canopy. Another Zero tried to match his altitude and lost lift, spinning out and disintegrating into the waves. 2 left. He yanked the Lightning upward, climbing into the sun. The glare blinded the remaining pilots. One pulled away, losing him in the brightness. The last one followed too close, too fast. Hawthorne rolled, inverted behind him, and throttled up, not firing, just forcing the Zero into a climb beyond its limit. At 15,000 feet, the enemy engine coughed, stalled, and flamed out. The pilot bailed, 3 more kills, no gunfire, no mercy. When Hawthorne landed, his aircraft's fuel tanks were nearly empty. The ground crew asked if he'd fired at all. He shook his head. Didn't need to. That day, Allied intelligence issued a memo. Captain Hawthorne's tactics demonstrate a new form of air combat dominance. Fear can be a weapon, and he wields it better than bullets. But fear, like fire, burns both ways. And Ghost Eye Hawthorne was running out of air to breathe. The mission that would make him a legend and destroy him was just one dawn away. The dawn was blood orange over the Pacific, the kind of light that made the ocean look like it was on fire. Captain Edward Ghost Eye Hawthorne stood beside his P-38 Lightning, staring at the reflection of that sunrise on its silver skin. He had flown more than 100 missions, outsmarted entire squadrons, and haunted the skies without ever pulling the trigger. Today would be different. Command had received intelligence that the Japanese Death Hunters, the elite unit created to destroy him, were regrouping near Truk Lagoon. They'd already ambushed 2 bomber formations. If they weren't stopped, hundreds of American lives could be lost. The order came directly from the top. Hawthorne was to lead the interception. He said nothing. Just climbed into the cockpit and ran his gloved fingers across the worn metal of the controls, whispering the same line he always did. Keep me steady, old girl. The engines roared to life. The smell of oil, sweat, and fuel filled the air as the Lightning lifted off the runway, cutting through the morning haze like a blade. The sky above Truk was deceptively calm. Clouds hung low, the horizon blurred between sea and sky. Hawthorne leveled off at 20,000 feet, scanning. His radar operator back at base was feeding him bearings through the radio, ghost lead. Multiple bogies inbound, north-northeast. Looks like a dozen. No more, He adjusted his throttle. 12, 16, 20. 21 Japanese fighters closing in fast. For the first time in months, he felt something he thought he'd forgotten. Fear. He didn't hide from it. He used it. He climbed toward the sun, his favorite weapon. The death hunters followed, their engines wailing in pursuit. The glare blinded them, and Hawthorne vanished into the light. Then he dove. Twin contrails sliced through the clouds like knives. The Zeros scattered in panic, diving to avoid collision, shouting over radios in confusion. He twisted, rolled, and darted through their formation, but not attacking, just disrupting. 2 collided mid-turn. A third stalled, spinning into the ocean. The others regrouped. They'd learned his game. 1 Zero came in low, firing bursts that stitched the air around his canopy. Another climbed above him, boxing him in. Hawthorne jerked the stick hard left, diving toward the sea at over 400 miles per hour. The lightning rattled, wings vibrating violently. His altimeter spun down, 8,000 feet, 5,000, 3,000, too fast. Pull up, Ed, pull up! His wingman shouted, but Hawthorne didn't respond. He waited until the water filled his view, then yanked the stick with both hands. The P-38 screamed upward, skimming so close to the waves that salt spray hit the belly of the aircraft. The pursuing Zero wasn't so lucky. Its wingtip caught the surface, exploding into spray and flame. 3 down! His wingman breathed. You're insane. Insane works, Hawthorne replied, his voice calm, but something was wrong. The left engine had taken a hit. Oil pressure was dropping fast. Smoke began to leak into the cockpit. He checked his gauges. Fuel low, hydraulics failing. His lightning was dying. 2 more enemy fighters were still on his tail. He could run, dive into the clouds, try to make it home. But that would mean leading the rest of the death hunters straight toward his bomber group. And he wasn't going to let that happen. He looked over his shoulder, at the black dots closing in, then back at the ocean below. There was still 1 trick left. He throttled down his good engine and banked right, pretending to lose control. The enemy pilots closed in for the kill. He could almost see their faces. Then in a split second, he rolled the Lightning upside down and dove, straight between them. The turbulence from his twin engines ripped through their formation like a shockwave. 1 pilot panicked, pulling too hard on the stick. His aircraft snapped its wing clean off. The other tried to evade, lost his bearings, and slammed into a 3rd Zero. 3 explosions bloomed over the sea like flowers of fire. When Hawthorne leveled out again, he was alone. The radio crackled with static. His wingman's voice was gone. His instruments were failing one by one. The lightning was dying, but the sky was quiet. He had done it. 20 planes destroyed, and he had never fired a bullet, but the price was coming due. Smoke filled the cockpit. The heat was unbearable. He was too low to bail out, too far to glide home. The P-38's controls were sluggish, unresponsive. He looked down at the water, calm, endless, and waiting. He keyed the radio. Tell them it's over, he said softly. The death hunters are gone, Static answered. He smiled faintly. Guess that's good enough. The Lightning's engines sputtered one last time, then went silent. The aircraft dipped its nose and began its final descent toward the sea. Observers on a nearby destroyer saw it happen. A silver streak diving gracefully into the Pacific. No explosion, no wreckage, just a ripple on the surface where the legend disappeared. For weeks, they searched but found nothing. No body, no aircraft. Just stories. Months later, Allied pilots reported something strange. Japanese squadrons over the Pacific began abandoning dogfights mid-air. They claimed to see a lone P-38 rising out of the sun, diving at impossible speeds, then vanishing into the clouds. The rumor spread like wildfire. Some said it was Hawthorne's spirit, still flying, still haunting the skies, making sure no one ever forgot that fear itself could be a weapon. Officially, he was listed as missing in action. Unofficially, they called him the pilot who shot down 20 planes without firing a bullet. And even today, over the blue silence of the Pacific, when the light hits just right and the clouds roll low, some pilots swear they can still hear the faint growl of a twin-engine Lightning cutting through the sky, hunting, guiding, and protecting from beyond. Because legends don't need bullets. They just need the courage to fly.